Alright, sorry about that, guys. Now that we're back, I want to go over a couple more things. This will be part 2 to our video, but we're still talking about polynomials. So down there at the bottom, let's go ahead and skip the table underneath where it says constant term. We'll come back to that and let you practice here in a second, and we'll go over the answers afterwards. But let's talk about standard form and coefficients. That's the next part I want to get into. So it says the standard form of a polynomial, it says the terms are written in decreasing order by their exponents. So in other words, greatest from least. So the example they give us is negative 4 x squared plus x cubed plus 3. So if we wanted to take this and write it in standard form, we need to pay attention to the variables. Or my bad, not to the variables, to the exponents. So here we only have 2 exponents, and if it doesn't have an exponent and it's just a constant like 3 out here, that always comes at the end. So in this case, we want to put these in order from greatest to least. So obviously the greatest exponent would be x cubed. So x cubed comes first. And we don't write any signs out in front of it because we know that it's positive, so it's understood. Next is going to be the square. So we have negative 4x squared, because squared is going to be the next highest term. And then lastly, we have our constant, which is going to be the plus 3. Now, once we get this written out, we have everything in order from greatest to least by the exponent. Now, to identify the coefficients, we need to look at each number. So the coefficient is the number in front of the letter. So here, our first coefficient is understood to be 1. So we're going to list these as coefficients. I'm going to abbreviate again. So our first coefficient is 1. Our second coefficient is negative 4. And then I know on your paper it has 3 listed, but I don't consider this as a coefficient because do you see a variable written out beside it? Well, of course not. So what I'm going to say is that these are the only 2. You can scratch out that 3 that they have written in as the answer. And then the last thing they talk about is the leading coefficient. Now this is very simple. I'm going to abbreviate it LC. The leading coefficient is going to be the first coefficient once you have it written in standard form. So we know that this is written in standard form. So the very first coefficient, we would go back to the very beginning, which is right here, and we would look to see what the coefficient is there. So in this case, the coefficient was understood to be a number 1. So that's going to be our leading coefficient for this problem. So the leading coefficient we know will be first when the polynomial is written in standard form. And like I said, as long as you write it in standard form, that should make that pretty easy. Now down there at the bottom it says practice. It says write the polynomial x minus 4x cubed plus x to the fourth plus 3 in standard form. And then list the coefficient and the leading coefficients. Alright, so I want you to go ahead and practice that. You can pause the video now if you want to try that problem. Alright, welcome back. So let's clear this off the board and let's look at our problem and see what we have here. Alright, so in our problem it looks like we have, I said it a second ago, it's x minus 4x cubed plus 4, or x to the fourth plus 3. Now, to work this problem out, we want to first put it in standard form. So we're going to pay attention to our exponents. So here we know that x has a power of 1, it's understood. This x has a power of 3. This x has a power of 4. And then 3 is a constant, so it's going to come at the end no matter what. So to write this in order in standard form, we want to first start with our highest exponent, which is 4. So we're going to write x to the fourth, and it's going to be positive because there's a positive sign in front. Next, we would write the next highest number, which would be 3. So that's going to be negative 4x cubed. After that, we have a choice between the constant or an x to a power of 1. So we always want to make sure we put the x in there next. So that's going to be a positive x to a power of 1. And then, like I said, the constant always comes last. So the constant here is 3. So this takes it into what we call standard form, all right? Here we're in standard form. We'll write SF for standard form. Next, it wanted us to identify the coefficients. So the coefficients here we can identify the coefficients by looking at the number in front of each variable. So the first coefficient would be understood to be 1. The second coefficient would be understood to be -4. And in this case, we actually have a third coefficient because we have a third variable, which is going to be +1. Now, to identify the leading coefficient, it's very simple. Since it's in standard form, look at the very first number in the problem. So here, the first number would be understood to be 1. So we would write our answer as 1. All right, so that basically takes us through our notes for today. I want you to go back and see if you can do the table above. Work that out, see what you come up with, and then I'll come around and check it. All I need you to do is raise your hand.